Welcome to the SEO Insider with your host, Seth Price, founder of BluShark, taking you inside the world of legal marketing and all things digital.
Welcome, everyone. We are so excited to have Raphael Crawford-Marks here. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Seth. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, look, Bonusly in my world, both the digital world as well as the law firm world, has been, a topic of conversation. A lot of friends are not just users, but raving fans. Talk to me a little bit about how this came about.
Absolutely. Bonusly started as a side project for me. I was a software engineer before I became an entrepreneur, and I was really interested in creating software that helped employers and employees get along better, understand one another better, and ideally stay in longer, more productive relationships with one another. So the genesis of that thinking was Bonusly, which I built as a side project until it was too big to run as a side project anymore, and then raised some capital, and we've been growing ever since.
That's awesome. We've had the founder of 15Five on here before, and it was fascinating because each of these are components that, not that Bonusly doesn't work well in a brick and mortar office, but that the struggles that we have faced in the new normal, where many people have stayed virtual. We now run, as many people do, international teams as well as domestic teams. Our domestic team is not fully in the office and we're able to hire from around the country. It seems that people are, jonesing for anything that can create touch points, whether it be communications or culture or esprit de corps. Is this something that, how have you seen this transition where before we were around each other and you could bring back Starbucks for the office? That's not a thing anymore. Has this, serendipity sort of, I assume propelled you even further along the lines of this need to connect and share?
It has, in a way, though the pandemic didn't create any trends so much as it accelerated a couple pre-existing trends, is the way we look at it. And what it fundamentally goes back to is employees are not coin-operated robots. Yes, you need to have fair compensation to get employees to consider working for you. But the reason why people stay at a job, why they put forth discretionary effort for a job, has a lot more to do with their feelings than their compensation. And when we were in person, you could get some things that would foster those positive feelings and get that discretionary effort and get those connections sort of for free, if you will, because people were in the office and having sort of serendipitous touch points with one another. Now we don't get that for free if we're hybrid or fully remote. But the need is still there. The need to feel like your work matters, like you are learning and developing and growing in your career, and the need to feel that you are a valued member of the team. We call it a sense of purpose, a sense of progress, and a sense of belonging. That's what employees need to be able to produce and stay with an employer over the long term. And that's what we're focused on delivering with Bonusly.
Let me ask you a question. I'm going to take this to a personal side. I know I spend too many minutes and hours worried about points, that if I never worried about them, whether it be credit card or airlines, I would probably be better off with a simple cashback card that banked cash. But instead, I'm not willing to do a connecting flight, but I do all sorts of stuff for things that I think are fun. Is there an element to this that if you came up to a coworker and said, here's 75 cents, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But the fact that it's connected in something that it's monetizable and there's a reward to it, but doesn't have a direct, you feel that there's something more or that can be saved towards something that doesn't go into your, the bucket, the bottomless bucket that is your personal finances, where the money might be taken out by a significant other, not spent on you and on what you want, that this is sort of a proprietary, non-taxed special world. Does that add to the whole dynamic?
It is, you could think of it as additive. The way I think about it is the sort of, and for people who don't know, in Bonusly, the foundational mechanic is that every employee has an allowance of points. You can brand it however you want, a company currency. The only thing they can do with those points is give them out in small increments to recognize great work and wins, large and small, throughout the organization. And then as people save up earnings from these points, they can redeem them for rewards that Bonusly fulfills. Really, the way I think about it is those points are the oil that you put in the recognition engine, right? And when you put oil in your own engine, there's no benefit, there's no value in the oil itself. The value is in being able to get from point A to point B. And so the value of Bonusly is really in creating positive habits around giving frequent, specific, authentic recognition in your employee population. And then sort of the lubricant that allows that to happen are the points.
That's awesome. On a personal note, I left. You were saying when we talked earlier, you were an engineer turned entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I was a lawyer turned entrepreneur, and when I left big law before I started my law firm and what's now BluShark, I worked for a company called Freeride, which was an early points program during the first .com bubble, where it was commercial based, where like a My Points or Net Sentence were the competitors, where they were businesses. I think it's what eBay morphed into over time, but you could get points for taking actions online. And it was a powerful piece. You were essentially lubricating people towards doing things that the businesses wanted. The idea that you're doing this to sort of help social engineer relationships, because the piece that I have seen is that you have limited time, and that there's never a moment where you're saying, hey, who can I give a shout out to? The fact that there's something attached to it is awesome. And that's, but the fact is, without that purpose, without having something to do it, there may not be, you don't have that incentive to, hey, I have to use these in some way, which forces you to think about what good deed or what good karma can I push forward.
Exactly. Typically, the forcing function is at the end of some big project, there's a celebration, and maybe the person who led that project is recognized. The problem with that is, say that was a 2-month-long project, what were the daily small wins contributed by many teammates that led up to that big culminating event? And wouldn't you want to have been recognizing all of those along the way? And so that's what we try to create at Bonusly, is an environment that recognizes all wins, large and small, and enables all employees to feel like, hey, my work matters and is visible, and what I'm doing, what I'm contributing matters to the team.
Let me ask you a question, because as a business owner, you're always thinking about, okay, this, like, SaaS-based solutions are really cool. They also add up. You're paying your per seat licenses. You're now funding it, and I know it works. I just acquired an amazing director of marketing who was at a company that did have Bonusly, and he's sort of like, this is a 6-figure earner who's like, I need to make sure I get my money out before the old place turns it off. It's the forefront of his mind. So my question is that those are the positives, right? Obviously, there's a lot of positive to it. Are there any pitfalls that you've seen, or sort of things where there's a malaise where if you don't, it's a tool? Is there anything that you would think that you have learned watching people, where somebody who is not using it productively, where they might fizz out? What are the things that you should watch out for whenever doing a program like this?
Yeah. So, we have a set of best practices that we really encourage our customers to adopt, but it is a highly customizable program. And so it is possible to go afield of those best practices. And I think where employers run into trouble is, going back to points as lubricant, the average sort of dollar value of a piece of recognition in Bonusly is $1. $1, right? So you're not like breaking the bank. It's a few dollars per employee per month in terms of the value of these recognitions being exchanged. It's not changing anyone's overall compensation, but some companies feel very uncomfortable with that and want to bring that down to zero. Now, you can do that. There are ways to configure Bonusly such that its points have literally zero value. What happens though is you're sending a clear message to your entire employee population. We actually don't care if you do this. We're not willing to put anything behind this. And we have data that shows that when you go to zero value for points, you get a pretty significant and sustained drop in participation over time. Whereas as soon as you have a tiny bit of value, our exchange rate is 10 cents per point. As soon as you have a little bit of value, you get extremely high participation that sustains over time. There's no drop over time. And why this matters is, Gallup has found that employees who have been recognized within the past 7 days are 10 to 20% more productive and 10 to 20% less likely to attrit out than those who haven't. So frequent recognition is really critical. That's why it's important to get all employees regularly recognizing one another.
It's funny you say that. I just had a life experience today that I was dealing with a touchy situation with a remote employee, been with us probably better part of a decade, who I don't speak to regularly and have criminally little contact with, meaning there should be more, but it just happens. Right. And there was clearly angst from a conversation 8 years ago. Now, the thought that there's what to me, the question is, great, I can't undo that in one sense, but the more positive pieces you put in the interim, I assume that it's one of those things that there are going to be ups and downs in any business life. People's own lives have up and downs. We've had pandemics, we've had all these things, but the fact that there's a positive piece, we're talking, I come from the digital side. One of the things that is important within my world is there are two pieces, but one of them is looking at reviews. The hot topic in this world, and outward facing reviews are very, very important. And one of the ways you get those is happy employees internally that are doing a good work and at the same time making an ask at the end and reminding somebody that that's something you want. You get on every tour that you take. You now get at a real estate closing. Jiffy Lube does it. Law firms are no different.
Right.
One of those things, though, that I've always found is that there are people that are less comfortable asking for that. And I feel that part of, as the ADHD is going to kick in heavy here. When I'm dealing with raising kids, similarly, there are certain tasks that they do not wish to do. Anytime something can be gamified, where you are making the interpersonal piece more than, please do this for me, which whether it's an employee or a child, but and not that there's going to be points associated with that specific action, but the moment that they are doing things, recognizing positive attributes, to me, that is going to put you in a position where you've lubricated the concept of the interaction between people, that when good things happen, something happens in return. My big, big wish would be that this somehow creates that ethos that we, not in a negative transactional way, but in a this is life, that we do good things and that things come back to us. That would be my wish, putting on the SEO geek hat for a moment.
Absolutely. And what I heard there was, a little, I heard sort of pain points in a couple of different areas. One is, hey, we are now remote or somewhat, at least somewhat remote, hybrid. We have distributed teams like so many companies are. And especially for employees who are remote, there's so much that's communicated, even non-verbally, when you're co-located with other employees. And remote, what we do miss out on as remote employees, and hey, I'm a remote employee as well, is the opportunity to just see like a smile on the face of someone else if you've done a good job, like even some non-verbal cues. And so those intentional touch points to share how someone's doing and how their good work has impacted other colleagues and the business is so crucial to do, especially when they're not getting regular in-person touch points. And so having a habit of giving recognition is really important for that. The other one is, yeah, it's crucial to get, customer reviews, right? To grow the positioning of your business. And with that, recognition can really help make visible what success looks like, right? So if I'm a new hire at your organization and I see my colleagues getting recognized for making that ask to get a review at the end of a relationship or call with a customer, that tells me what I need to do to be successful, and so I can emulate that, right? It makes what success is visible to everyone else in the organization. And I think similar to kids, like, you got to be clear, like, this is what success looks like. You got to do this. You have to be very specific.
No, it really is. I spent a lot of time. How do I live in a suburban, well-to-do bubble, and getting my kids to sort of that social grace. It is, trying to figure out and not wanting to bribe your kids, but find something that will sort of, as to steal your word, lubricate that concept of the back and forth. So talk to me a little bit about the differences between domestic and international. We have pushed during COVID since January 2021, opened significant Latin American presence, both at Price Metals and at BluShark. What have you learned about utilizing a program like this for people overseas versus domestically?
Yeah, I think the first thing we learned, which was a lesson that came in the early days of Bonusly, because we saw pretty rapid uptake by international companies pretty early on in the lifetime of Bonusly. So the first thing we learned was we had a suspicion that, hey, we're grounding this in human psychology. Human psychology should be human psychology if it's foundational enough everywhere around the world. And we are seeing that is true. 35% of Bonusly users are located outside of the United States. Even though most of our customers are actually US-based customers, though we do have a number of customers in the EU and APAC and others. But once a company reaches a certain size, they're almost certainly hiring employees in other countries, right? You're doing that, right now. And so it's really important to make sure that employees are connecting across geographic boundaries, along with, many other ways. And so we've seen Bonusly be really successful at doing that, and have really leaned into it as well. One thing that you often see is see companies hiring employees in countries with significantly different costs of living. And so there's literally a checkbox you can turn on if that's your company, to adjust your spend by the purchasing power parity of each country that your employees are in, so that your spend is tailored to sort of the cost of living and exchange rate per country.
Well, do any people do the opposite, which is, hey, a couple dollars a person per month's not going to make or break me. And allowing that to be more substantial
Absolutely.
As a way to, it is, again, and the world is, it's just a fascinating time, right? Where, you're seeing in a good way, the salaries commanded in many places that historically had been very low, are now people are able to prove their worth and get that. At the same time, the idea that if you're putting something in place, that it kind of appears to be something where if it's even more meaningful for somebody, somewhere else, what are there any sort of lessons learned? Like, look, as you said, human nature, people are going to like it. Is the concept, at least my perception domestically, is that this is usually a frivolous extra and not something that is mission critical to raising your family. It's usually a fun extra. Is there a difference in perception in certain countries where this is actually a way where it's not as fun, but actually helps make, everything ends meet, to lack of a better way of saying it?
Well, I think there's a sort of a shift in perspective I would encourage, which is that domestically, no, it's not about changing your overall compensation picture, right?
Correct.
It's not about, like, you shouldn't be thinking, oh, like, am I going to be able to pay my bills if I get enough, bonusly recognition this month?
No,
That's not what it's for. What it is though for is that it meets very deep and real psychological needs that your employee population has. It's, again, to feel like your work matters, that you are a valued member of the team, and to know what you're doing well so you can do more of it. And that's really what it's meeting in the employee population. You also hear in survey after survey of employees who aren't using Bonusly, gosh, I really wish I had a better way, an easier way to express thanks and appreciation for my colleagues. Something I want that I don't have. So right. Yes, no, it's not critical to the bottom line of your bank statement, but it is meeting a very critical need in terms of the bottom line of your psychological well-being and your emotional commitment to your work.
Nice.
And I think it does the same for international employees. And there would be a risk of damaging that if it were about making enough to make ends meet.
No. I wasn't able to articulate it, but is it depending on where you are, dollar extra, if you make an extra $20 in a month, it's not it is not something that's going towards necessities in your world.
Right.
Is there a difference in perception when that $20 is not just a Starbucks you could buy for yourself, but rather something? I'm just sort of prodding. Have you noticed anything different in how it's perceived? Look, would be, if anything, more important, but like just curious to know, depending on, because you talked about some companies actually adjusting based on, and maybe that's to make sure that it's really not a substantial piece so that it is kept pure. But is there something to that where if somebody does put the spend at enough of a level, is there a point where it goes beyond just recognition, but is not, I know it's not the intent. I'm just curious to know how that's played out.
Yeah. So we haven't seen that, I think, in part because we do have this functionality to sort of keep the spend level at a level where it is real currency. It is perceived to have real economic value, but it is not a significant percentage of your compensation picture, right? It's very, very, very tiny minority of your overall compensation. We do have companies that, again, we're very highly customizable. Some companies have just gone, really big with this, and they'll have we have a EU-based company that where their allowance, their sort of the allowance they have to give out translates to 100 euros per month, and they have a pretty high LATAM employee population where that goes a much longer way.
Right. So when is it a fun incentive versus a bonus or Bonusly? Is it, it's a play on words for most of it, but if you're putting 100 euros behind it, it sort of is a way of allocating bonus money.
Yeah. And the only thing that we see different, actually, we don't see anything different there. What we see is we just see what we see in other places, which is sustained usage.
Is there more usage when the dollar, if you said it was bad if it was nothing, it just needs to be nominal. Do you see the usage go up when the value, or is it how it's used?
Only nominally. I mean, it really is like when you go from 0 to some value, you get that sustained participation, and then it's sort of like a logarithmic scale where like the more value you go out, you get the marginal returns on participation are decrease very rapidly to almost 0.
One thing I'm curious about, and I'm curious to know how you thought it. So I, like many entrepreneurs, tried a bunch of different incentives over time. And one of the things I always am concerned about is whenever I do something that to be whoever gets the most, that a certain percentage of people are like, well, I'm not getting the most, so I check out. How are some of the
Yeah.
ways that you can make sure, now granted, it's not a most, everybody has money. Are there any tricks or hacks that you like to make sure that you don't get a person hidden away who is sort of like, well, I can't get enough to have anything meaningful, so it is too small and I'm out, versus, making sure that you pull, to me, it's what the person who's going to go and be the fighter and be the best. I don't say don't honestly, but like there are a lot of things you can do. You're doing this to the masses for your entire group. How do you make sure that bottom 20% stays involved?
Yeah. So a couple ways. I think one is you definitely don't want a winner take all situation. That's what the classic employee of the month is, right? The employee of the month is a terrible thing to implement, because every employee of the month, you're being like, hey, Seth is awesome, and by implication, no one else is as awesome as Seth. And it sort of creates this really
but I'll challenge you on that. I get it, and we're doing both, right? We have a bonusly coming. We have employee that we've recently done. Is there? That's like the birthday. When it's somebody else's birthday, it's like yeah, but it's your birthday. And on Facebook, for example, and you get like 500 messages. That's a really cool thing, and it's sort of a Ponzi scheme that everybody plays into.
Yeah, the shift there though is everyone gets a birthday. Not everyone's guaranteed to win Employee of the Month, right? There's only 12 of those, and if your company has more than 12 people, then they're
gonna hang around for a year or two.
Right, right. And then at that point, like if it really is a rotation, why have Employee of the Month?
Well, no, right? But meaning whoever's, again, it would be the pinnacle. But I guess the other problem that you have, and I've seen this is very often the same person wins a lot, because there's one person who's the real gunner who hits the metrics of whatever you're doing.
Yeah,
fair point.
So Bonusly alleviates that by being really, really inclusive. So the median employee enrolled in Bonusly gives and receives 2 recognition posts per week. About 85% of all employees across all companies, and we have well over 3,000 companies using Bonusly now, across all of our companies, every month, more than 85% of all of the employees at all of those companies use Bonusly, and not just log in. I'm talking giving and receiving recognition. Right. So there, like the level of inclusivity is much greater, though there is still the potential that someone's not getting recognized. Right now, what we've done is we've invested in analytics tools that highlight where their people might be disconnected. So anyone on the HR team or administrator can look and slice and dice their data by team, by department, by business unit, by location, and see, hey, where is recognition participation higher and where is it lower? You can visualize the social graph of your organization, that visualize literally who is connected to whom, and see if there's anyone hovering out there unconnected to anyone else, or with much lighter connections to anyone else. And so we can't necessarily solve that, because there is an org design element to it, but we can highlight it to be solved to the right people at your organization.
Can you tell if somebody's checked out and on the way out?
I can tell you that we have some very exciting features on the way.
Well, that was my final question to you, which is what is next? Because look, the found, like as a points guy, I love it, right? I love the concept, right? And now I'm getting more scientific about maximizing point and redemption rewards and all that stuff that a lot of people have gotten into. But what is next for you guys? Like, because obviously the platform is awesome, but I assume the data is even more awesome.
Yes. So the data is incredible. Bonusly, because of that high participation rate we get, Bonusly is the system of record for all of the accomplishments, large and small, that occur in your organization, and for how employees are connected to each other. And so what's coming next is leveraging that data to help strengthen the relationships between managers and their direct reports. We focus specifically on that manager report relationship because it is the most important relationship at every organization. It is absolutely true and borne out by data that people quit bad managers. They don't quit companies. And so the more we can help managers be great at their jobs, the happier, more productive, longer tenured employees you're going to have. And so it does take the form of not like, hey, someone's checked out, go punish them. No,
No. I get that.
Hey,
No more like, hey, you got a
manager,
risk
like,
factor
hey,
here.
we think you should be checking in with this employee more often, or we think they might have these needs that aren't being met. And so really helping managers be more effective with all of their reports.
That's awesome. Well, Raphael, thank you so much. This is awesome. I can't wait to be playing with this myself and expect big things, and can't wait to see what you do with this incredible data trove.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the SEO Insider with Seth Price. Be sure to check back next week for fresh insights into building your brand's online presence. Episodes are available to stream directly on BluShark Digital's website.